Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and we're covering part 2 now of this anniversary update, and I want to talk about why isolating eras is one of the most important things that is inside of this title update. I'm actually going to go out on a limb and say, if you are an early to mid-game spender and free to play, this is the best news you've probably ever gotten. I really love this change of isolating era content. We're going to talk about why it's important, the way it will impact you, and explaining how this will change the way you'll want to be analyzing resources and looking for return in your account. So with that said, folks, like, subscribe, comment. Let's give a quick shout to our channel members for all of their continued support. If you're ever interested, that link is below. More importantly, guys, go check out the Discord. Get conversations started there. I love when I see people, interacting in there. It's a lot of fun to get to hear from you guys. So thank you again. Let's get in here and let's talk about this era update and the isolated nature that they're going to be moving to. Alright, so we're going to flip back over to a screen capture again because that's where we're going here. So we're going to the forums. And where we're going to scroll down to here is eras. Now again, this is explaining the era system, which we already kind of know, right? We're already kind of aware of that era system. So where we want to start is this next anniversary era. And again, these are the characters that are going to be coming next era. They do talk about them, but again, I really like this. By the way, I really love this graphic. That is a really cool thing. We're going to probably use that for the title card, actually. So, isolating eras. Eras will be isolated from the rest of the game, which we're referring to as legacy content. During the era in which each Marquee and Journey Guide unit is released, both Journey Guide and Marquee units will be considered an era unit. When an era unit ends, all the current units will transition to legacy. When the next era begins, the newest Marquee and Journey Guide released will be considered era units for its duration. So basically, in this first era that we're going to get, these are the era-related characters. Then, when the era is over, they will transition to legacy units, and then the next era units will be considered, the era ones. This is an important distinction for two reasons. Era units can only be used in era modes and will not be allowed in legacy modes. So to understand that distinction, think about the pirates. Pirates would have not been able to be used until they were no longer inside of the era game modes. Think about the Clone Troopers, Jedi Vanguard. Those characters would not be able to be added into Grand Arena, Territory Wars, and Territory Battles until the era is officially over. Era units only use era resources for progression, while legacy units will continue to use existing materials and recipes for upgrades. Legacy units cannot be used in era modes or upgraded with era materials. So they're splitting the progression system. This isolation is primarily to allow players to progress in both the latest content and grow their rosters with legacy content without having to choose where to put their resources. But a detailed explanation is below. So basically they start, describing what goes on, right? So basically what's going on, guys, is if we kind of scroll down here, there's going to be a new way to level up characters with this. And again, they're showing like different materials and stuff that will only be available in the era. So Stormtrooper Luke, when he's the era unit, when he's released as this Marquee, he's only going to be available to be upgraded with these era materials. And again, it's going to depend on the level that you can take them to is going to be dependent on star level, right? So again, the higher star you have, the higher level you can get them to for these era units, which again, they will be earned from participating through Coliseum, Marquee events, Journey events, and episode track milestones, or even purchase from the store. When they become legacy units at the end of an era, they will convert the character, gear, relic material to the level they were associated with. The specifics are still being finalized, but here are some examples of how your units would be converted over. So, era level 65. This will mean level 65, if you look, that means that you're getting the character to basically 3 stars, right? If you look, 4 stars required for 66 plus. So if you can get the character to level 65, which would be a 3-star unit, You're going to get them at level 85, gear 12, ability level 7. This is where we expect most players to reach with free-to-play. So if you're free-to-play, you're going to be getting a gear 12 character at the end of an era. That's a huge boost. Think about how many times you're going through these eras right now as a free-to-play. How many of you are actually taking Forlom and Zuckuss to gear 12? That's hundreds of Kyrotech that you're going to save on these era units, which can be invested directly into some of the legacy units that you're trying to work on. Again, as a free-to-play, that's a huge change. If you can get the character to level 80, you would get them at Relic 2, ability level 7, which requires 5 stars. If you notice, 6 stars required for 86 plus, so 5 stars sort of translates to level 80. That will get you max level, Relic 2, and level 7. The max level in era content is 95. This will make a character level 85, Relic 6, and it will give you the Zeta. So that's a pretty, when you think about that for some players who really are, significantly spending in the game right now, getting those Zetas included when it transitions is a huge boost to your resources, and it will allow you to progress significantly faster in the game. So I do really like this, right? I think isolating these units, these progression systems is massive, because one major problem that a lot of players have encountered, particularly the free-to-play, with Forlom and Zuckuss as great examples, there's no real purpose to these units for some players. I'm sure that there will be some datacrons coming. I'm sure there'll be some things where these guys, start to gain that level of significance. But for most of you, until they're 7-star or until they're needed for something, they're just going to sit in your account, and there's not a lot of benefit to upgrading them. Now, because they're going to be needed for these era game modes, and they're separating the way you level them. So now, it's not only that you'll still have that chance to upgrade them, but it won't punish you. And in fact, you'll want to interact with the legacy era content as much as possible, because the further you can get these characters leveled inside of the era-based content is less legacy gear that you'll have to spend. And that legacy gear means you can work on all these existing things like Hondo and Ahsoka and everything that exists in the game now. This stuff will be far more accessible because you'll be using a different level of progression inside of era content. So I do really think that's a great change, particularly for the free-to-play community and the mid to early game spenders. And the reason I say mid to early is because some of you guys who've been spending at that point in the game, you have trouble trying to balance between getting Ahsoka or Hondo or some of these older things in your account, because they all need the same kind of gear. They all need the same things. Now, switching to this new gear system for the newest characters, while they're in that era, upgrade them, and you can still progress your account this way. I think that's a really significant change. I do really like that a lot. Thumbs up, CG, this is great. Now, if you're already someone who's spending on these characters, this is not necessarily, it'll still help you. Maybe not to the degree that it's helping the other players, but you're still going to get your advantage because you'll be able to use them in those era-based modes like the Coliseum and get an advantage over everybody who's not spending that way. So, and again, just kind of going through, this is the primary place to earn Relic 10 materials. There will be era challenges. So I don't want to kind of go more into all of this stuff because, again, I know it's been covered a lot, but I did really want to make sure we understand how isolated eras are really going to be a big deal for you. And the other thing that's changing with these eras is that for the journey guide, instead of needing to wait until the character is 7 stars to be able to do anything, they're going to be able to be unlocked at 4-star, right? So the first 5 era marquees at 4, at era level 45, will unlock the new journey guide at 4. The new journey guide unit will require 5 marquee units at 5. The 5-star, the 6 and 7-star will require the 6 and 7-star characters respectively. And then after a significant amount of time, it will become a legacy event, but it will have different requirements as the marquees will no longer be era units. So what you'll want to think about there is if you can get these journey guide units while they're in the era, you're gonna have a significant leg up. So I do really think, again, that is a great change. Because think about, like, for example, and I'm going to use my account here. If you think about Hondo right now. Now, obviously, I wouldn't be able to get Hondo since he's a little bit different. But even going back to, like, Jedi Vanguard. I had all the Jedi Vanguard at 5-star. I had all the Clone Troopers at 5-star. I would have been able to unlock Mace Windu. Right? I would have been able to lock Jedi Master Mace Windu much earlier in my account's lifespan. Because I would have, you know, had those characters at that point during their era-related content. So I would have been able to have Jedi Master Mace Windu, which could have changed some things about maybe Grand Arena, Territory War, whatever it is, right? Conquest gets easier because I would have had him unlocked already. So I do think this is that's kind of part of the change that you need to look at and really say, this is good news for us. Now, what does this mean for your legacy gear and your legacy materials, and how do you want to be spending them? How does this change? And I think the answer is going to be, for accounts like mine, my characters like Baze and Pow and, you know, these guys, I'm going to have a bit more freedom to invest some resources there and not feel like it's going to stop me or hinder my progression on the new stuff. That has been a big area that I've struggled with, is how am I supposed to bring Bane to relic levels when I'm going to need this gear for Forlom? I'm going to need it for Zuckuss or for Hondo. If I can unlock them, get them to relics with this other system, I'm cutting out a significant portion of my investment. And especially if you think about your guild materials, if I don't have to buy as much of this gear because my characters are getting to relics through this progression, or maybe you don't need to buy as much of the core gear or Chirotech because you're getting them to gear 12, that opens up your resources to buy other things to make everything else easier. So I really do think that this isolated era, guys, I cannot stress enough how great of an update this is. The only maybe potential negative thing is when I think about the Coliseum, where they say this is the primary way to earn Relic 10 materials, more on Relic 10 below. My only question here is the dynamic between how much of these era units, right, getting them to Relic 6, that's great. But when that happens, they transition to Legacy, how will all those resources come together? What will that look like? So that if I think about someone, will they still feel that those Relic 10s are of benefit to their account, right? You're going to say, oh, well, yeah, they will be. But what if you get out of this era system and then you still need to take that character from Relic 6 to Relic 10? Will those materials for Relic 7, 8, and 9, will they be accessible enough through all the work you're doing inside of the era? Or will it require some additional investment in the legacy stuff? So that's the one area that I'm not as sure on. And again, I think they are ironing out those details. But I was kind of thinking about it from a investment perspective. Don't just think you might need to be investing not just in the era stuff, but also in some of those legacy materials as well, to ensure that you're coming out of the gate and firing on all cylinders. So I did want to at least mention that. I'm not quite sure the full impact of that yet, and we're going to have to wait and see. But overall, this is a very, very positive update. I cannot stress enough how much I really like this change, and I'm really looking forward to it. Like, subscribe, comment. I love you all. May the Force be with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, my friends.